Before we get started on the details of the changes that were made, we just wanted to first direct your attention to an email that we just sent out a little after noon to all users of the long-term care facility component. We heard that there were issues reported by users on Friday when the application release was occurring. We had planned for this application update to occur Thursday night, but unfortunately, unexpected delays had caused these updates to occur throughout the day, Friday as well. And during this time, because there were changes being made, the person level vaccination data may have appeared strangely, such as, for example, previously entered data appearing as missing. But now that the application deployment is complete, the data should appear as expected, and data were not modified or removed as a result of the deployment. So today, now that the updates are completed, users should return to the application and continue data entry in the person level vaccination forms as usual. And keep in mind, and we will go into more detail on this in this presentation, but if you can't view your person level healthcare personnel or staff vaccination data, additional user rights may be needed to be assigned in order to continue to view and report the person level staff vaccination data. You need to have an administrator check the staff/visitor add, edit, delete box, or the staff/visitor view boxes under user rights in order to continue accessing and submitting person level staff vaccination data. And like I mentioned, we will go into further detail on that. But if you are noticing any issues that are still occurring as of today, please do reach out to the user support box and we will take a look and get back to you as soon as possible.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, we felt like it was important to start at the top with our apologies and clarification about possible issues on Friday. So now that we've done that, without further ado, we'll dive right in. As a reminder, just to level set everyone on the call today, there remain 3 different options for submitting your weekly COVID-19 vaccination data. The facilities will continue to submit these cumulative weekly totals to these modules in one of these ways. So you can continue to submit weekly summary data through the data entry screen of the weekly summary modules. You can use CSV upload for those weekly summary modules, or what we'll focus on today's webinar, the option for long-term care facilities that we've added is submitting these data through the person level, sometimes called event level, COVID-19 vaccination forms. And after you fill out that person level line list, as long as you click that view reporting summary and submit for the week in question, those data transfer right over to those summary modules. So again, we're focusing on number 3 of these options today. If you have any questions about the first 2 means of data entry, you can always reach out at nhsn@cdc.gov, but the rest of today will focus on the person level forms. Just as a high level overview, if you're new to using these forms remain optional. So you do not have to use these forms if you prefer those weekly summary counts, but these are a really helpful tool that can be used to report your weekly healthcare personnel and resident data if you're a long-term care facility. And what you do is you enter data on those individuals, so either residents or staff, line by line in this vaccination tool. And there's a couple of really great advantages here that we've heard from our users, but some of the highlights are listed here. So to start, the application will calculate and enter those weekly totals for you. So you don't have to spend time looking at admission and discharge and vaccination dates to decide what needs to be entered from week to week. If you fill out the optional person level form completely, the application will total that. Secondly, it will also look at those vaccination dates and determine who is up to date based on the definition for that period of interest and submit that information for you on the weekly screen as well when you click that view reporting summary and submit option. So we know that the definition of up to date evolves as the guidance changes, and this really streamlines your data entry by calculating it for you. And lastly, it can be a great way to help organize and manage all of your data. You likely have some sort of tracking system for this information anyway, so now it can be all in one place. And we've had a lot of great user feedback that after initial adoption of these forms, it makes reporting a lot easier and quicker too, so much more efficient. So we have some previous materials that go over the basics of data entry if you're new to the forums, but for today, what we're focusing on is what's changed in this last release. So what are the main updates for these person level forms as of the release?
Thanks, Heather. And just one more item before I get into covering these updates. If you are reporting any issues in the Q&A chat, if you could also provide the CCN of your facility, or just know that any issue that you report in the Q&A chat, it would be most helpful if you send a ticket to nhsn@cdc.gov and include your org ID and a screenshot of the issue that you're observing. That would help us be able to get back to you with a response specific to your facility and try to determine how to resolve it.
And we definitely appreciate all of the feedback. We want this tool to be a tool that works well for everyone. So any feedback that you're giving in the chat, yeah, it's noted and maybe reflected in future releases as it makes sense and as we're able.
Right, and we'll do the best we can to work with our developers in response to this feedback after this deployment in order to resolve these issues. So I'll go into these updates now, just providing a summary of the changes that were made and why they were made, and how they should be functioning in the application. So first, the main change that was made was the record linkage of the NHSN person level or event level vaccination forms being linked to matching records in other person level tables entered in NHSN, such as in the NHSN long-term care component, such as the POC tool or the lab ID events. And by making this linkage, this led to the demographic variables of race, ethnicity, and gender being added to the person level vaccination form records. And in addition, we'll get into these details later in the presentation, but there was an update made to user rights in order to enhance the security of the staff person level vaccination data. And as I mentioned earlier, to continue entering person level staff vaccination data, users will need to have the staff visitor add, edit, delete box and the staff visitor view box checked under user rights. And administrators can grant these rights. But facility administrators will continue to automatically have access. And I just mentioned that the linkage was performed to link the person level vaccination records to other person level data entered in NHSN. And these are other person level or event level forms in NHSN that collect data on individual residents and staff, such as the POC tool, the lab ID event form, the UTI event form, or the State Veterans Home COVID-19 event form. So all individuals and their demographic data that are entered on these individual person level or event level forms are stored in these overall NHSN resident and staff lists. So in this release, we linked the person level vaccination records to the NHSN resident and staff lists to provide consistency and integration across the forms.
So we're going to walk through some examples now of what this linkage to those resident and staff lists means for different records. So we'll start by walking through what this means for existing records. So any records that were entered before today, before 9/12, and how this linkage may affect those. So the first example I'm going to walk through is a record of an individual that was in the person level COVID-19 vaccination data form entered before 9/12 and is a perfect match. So it matches the underlying list in NHSN exactly. So in this case, what we mean when we say a perfect match is the resident or staff ID, first name, last name, and date of birth appear exactly in the person level vaccination record as they do in the NHSN resident list. So in this example, we have the resident Simon Williams, who's a male with a date of birth of 1/1/1950. This is a fictitious example, but because this is a perfect match to the underlying list, when I log in this morning, I will note that gender, race, and ethnicity are automatically filled in based on what was provided in that NHSN list. So I don't need to do anything further for this existing record. This individual is linked to that list, and submission can continue as normal. The next example is an existing record entered before 9/12, but it's an imperfect match. So one of those identifiers does not match exactly. When there's not a perfect match, so that would mean either one or more of those fields, resident ID, first name, last name, or date of birth, do not match exactly with the underlying NHSN list. Those gender, race, and ethnicity fields will not be automatically filled in when you log in, but you'll notice, as highlighted in yellow here, a link button appears next to the resident identifier. We're using residents as an example here, but this would work the same for staff. So you'll have the option to click that link button, and if you hover over it, as shown in the screenshot here, there's a little bit of a description to remind you what the link button is doing. And when you click the link button, you'll be able to manually sort through that NHSN resident list to see if there is someone that is already existing that you would like to link it to. So this will remind you, as it says here, if anyone was previously entered, you can search for them, click on them, and copy that demographic information over. So let's walk through this example. So on the previous screen, I showed you a record of an Eric Masterson with a date of birth of 1/1/1950. Again, this is fictitious data. And when I click the link button next to his resident ID, a list similar to the one shown here will appear. We recommend changing the view option from 10 to 100 as shown in the bottom of this screenshot highlighted in yellow, just because it makes searching easier. And when I'm reviewing the entries of all individuals in my main resident list, I note that there is an Erica Matterson with the same date of birth and ID. It's just that there was one letter different. And so if I was this facility administrator and I'm filling out these data, I could verify and see, yes, this is actually the person that I intended to report vaccination data on. I just had a typo and forgot the A at the last letter of their name. So since that is the case, I would click this individual and click select, as shown here, and that would link those two records. And the demographic information would fill in based on the resident list. Now, it's totally okay if you don't see a match here. It's expected that there would be many records that would not already have a main list record, and that's totally fine. We'll walk through what to do in the next example. In that case, you would just click cancel. But we have our match here, so we'll click the select button. And you can see here where at first we had the link option and we were missing gender, race, and ethnicity. The updated resident record shows that the link button is gone. The name's been corrected to Erica. And we've also filled in our gender, race, and ethnicity information based on what was in that resident list. So this individual is linked and there's no further action required.
So next we'll walk through an example of an existing record that was entered before September 12th, where there's no match in the NHSN resident or staff lists. And in this case, users can optionally enter gender, race, and ethnicity. So first, you'll note that there was not a perfect match for this individual because the row is unlinked. We see the link button there. The name is in lowercase letters, which indicates that it hasn't been linked to the resident table. And the gender, ethnicity, and race are not filled in. So now if we want to check to see if this individual is somewhere on that on the underlying resident NHSN resident list, we will click the link button. And this shows us the NHSN resident list. I'll change the view to 100 records. And after reviewing the NHSN resident list, it looks like this individual does not appear to have a corresponding record. And as a reminder, this is fine and this is to be expected often. So I'll just click cancel. And since this is an existing record, you currently don't have to enter gender, race, and ethnicity at this time. So you can just simply leave the row as is. But you may optionally enter gender, ethnicity, and race if you would like to do so. And entering gender, ethnicity, and race will create a new record on the NHSN resident list for this individual. And it's optional to enter gender, ethnicity, and race for existing records until the week of October 24th to 30th, which will be the first week after the next application release, when this will become required for both existing and new records. And the reason that it will become required is because entering gender, ethnicity, and race adds this individual to the NHSN resident list. So we want all of the individuals to be basically treated the same as all of the other individuals that are entered in NHSN and to be added to that overall NHSN resident list. And just a note that unknown is an option for each of these fields in case you are not able to obtain the information on gender, ethnicity, or race. And this is an example of how you would add the demographic information to an existing unlinked record. So just like you would update an individual's row for any of the other columns, you would simply click within the box, the cell that you're trying to update. So in this case, you would click within the gender box on the individual's existing row, and you'll see a drop-down menu, and you'll select the gender from the drop-down menu. And then you will repeat the same steps for ethnicity and race. And for race, you should note that you will have to scroll down once you've clicked within the box in order to see all of the checkbox options. And also with race, you can select more than one race. And if you select decline to respond or unknown, then only in those cases, you can't select more than one box. So you can select more than one race if you're selecting an actual race category, but if you select unknown or decline to respond, then you can't select more than one. So this slide just provides a summary of record linking for existing person-level vaccination data. So everything we just reviewed with the first flow chart on the left side of the screens that displayed the flow charts. So we recommend reviewing the resident IDs and staff IDs that have been entered on the person-level vaccination forms and make sure that they match the IDs entered for the same individuals on the other forms. And you should consider linking all of those that you can now. So for those that are unlinked, we suggest clicking the link button and seeing if that individual has a record already on the NHSN resident list or the NHSN staff list. And if they do, then you should just select their name from that list and it will populate the demographic information and make sure that those two records are linked. And again, for existing records, you don't need to enter the gender, race, and ethnicity. If there's no match, you don't have to enter those data until the week of October 24th to 30th. But it's a good idea to get a head start and start entering gender, race, and ethnicity when you are able to do so, to get ahead of the week of October 24th. And just a reminder again, if you can't obtain that information, you can enter unknown.
So our hope is that this sort of soft rollout gives you guys about a month to go through and link and update those existing records rather than having you have to do it all at once. We know you are incredibly busy, so we want to give you time to link those records. The next set of examples we're going to walk through for record linking are for new records. So any data you enter from here on out today and into the future. And there are two potential options when you go to enter a new record. I'll walk through the first one, which is when you update that new record, there is a link that can be found using the Find or Link button. So any newly entered person-level vaccination record, when you click the Add Row button, if you're doing this in the form online, if you know the resident ID you're looking for, you can type that resident ID in the box as you have been. And then if it's found, it will autofill your name, date of birth, gender, ethnicity, and race from that NHSN list. And then you can just enter the vaccination data and click Save. So if you know the ID, it will fill out all that demographic information and you'll just be left to fill out that vaccination information. If you're not sure of the ID that might have been used previously in NHSN, or you don't know if they're in the NHSN list, then instead of entering an ID, you would start by clicking Find. And again, we've tried to make some descriptive options, some description over the Find button when you hover to remind you of the purpose of this button. So when you click Find, you'll be able to search through and see if this user is already in the list. So again, the screen should look familiar. When you click the Find button, since we're using a residence, for example, here, the NHSN resident list will appear on the screen. Just like before, we would recommend changing from 10 to 100 records at a time. And then you'll just scan through to see if you can find the person that you're looking for. So in this example, I'm looking for Judy Freeman with a birthday of 7/13/1962. So I would be looking through the first name, last name, and date of birth to see if I found anybody that was a match to that. And you can see highlighted in yellow here, I have found her. That's an exact match to those pieces of information. So I'm going to click that row and click Select. And then clicking Select is automatically going to fill in all of the information shown here, the resident identifier and demographics from that existing NHSN record on the NHSN resident list. So I'll just scroll over to the vaccination information, enter her vaccination details, and click Save Row like I normally would. So now, Hannah, folks might be wondering, what if I enter a new record that doesn't have a match?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So if you enter a brand new record on or after today, the 12th, and there's no match, so first you'll have to determine, does this person potentially already have a record in NHSN? So in order to enter a new record, you'll click the plus Add Row button. And if you don't know if this person has a record on the NHSN list, you'll want to click the Find button. And then in the bottom right corner, you'll see the NHSN resident list will appear again. So we suggest changing the view from 10 to 100 records and then scanning the list to see if the person you are looking for has a record. And if they don't have a record, then click Cancel. And since this individual doesn't have a corresponding record, you're going to want to type in a unique resident ID in the resident identifier box like you would normally. And when you click out of that box, you'll see an alert appear letting you know that this is a new ID. And all this alert says is could not find resident. You can directly enter a new resident from this screen. So it's just telling you, hey, by the way, it looks like this is a new resident that doesn't already exist in NHSN. And this is fine again. So you just, this is not a problem. So you'll just want to click OK. And then after you click OK, you can continue entering the data in this new resident row as usual. So you'll enter the name, the other vaccination data, but then in addition, to save this newly entered record, you will have to enter gender, ethnicity, and race for new records. And like I mentioned earlier, by entering gender, ethnicity, and race, this adds the person to the NHSN resident list. And again, a reminder, if you're unable to obtain the information on gender, ethnicity, or race, you may select the unknown options for each of these fields. So this is an example of how to add the demographic information for a new record. So you'll enter the ID, you'll click out of that box and you'll see that alert that says this is a new record. So you'll just click OK. And then continue entering the information, enter the name. And then for gender, you're going to use the drop-down menu in that field, in that box, to select the gender. And then you'll do the same for ethnicity, and you'll do the same for race. And again, for race, you have to scroll down to see all of the checkbox options. You can check more than one race, but you can also check decline to respond or unknown. You can't check more than one box if you check unknown or decline to respond. And this is just a summary of all of the information that we just provided on how existing and newly entered records are being treated in NHSN and any action that is associated with them. So we suggest taking a screenshot of this right now, and we will be posting these slides as soon as possible on our website. But it might be a week or so before we're able to get these out. So before we're able to get them officially posted. So we recommend taking a screenshot, and we will also follow up from this webinar with a summary of this information so that you have it on hand in the next week or so. And I just want to reassure you that those of you that are reporting issues, we're going to be reaching out and investigating and working with development to try to resolve these issues, hopefully very shortly.
Just a few tips and tricks to make this transition to linking to the resident and staff lists easier. You want to try to make sure you're always using the same ID for a single individual as you do on any other person or event level forms in NHSN. Secondly, we recommend that if you're using a new ID, that you don't use an ID that starts with a 0, the number 0. This is because if you choose to use CSV import for your data, sometimes there can be some formatting issues where it will drop that 0. So just best practice, especially if you're using CSV, is avoid that leading 0 is what we call that if you can. And then because we want all of these to be unique IDs, we also recommend avoiding using just a birthday or just a room number as an ID. Because as turnover occurs, those things can be shared across individuals, right? You have more than one person in a room, or you can have more than one person with the same birthday. So to avoid duplicates, we recommend using something longer and more unique than just a room ID or birthday. Additionally, if we went over already that if you select an ID from the NHSN list, then all of that information from the main list are filled in on the person level vaccination form. So one thing to keep in mind, once you've linked to the existing NHSN list, if you later go back and change that ID of the person level COVID-19 vaccination record. So if you had an ID that was 1, 2, 3, 4, and you linked it to the NHSN list because it was a perfect match, and then later you change that to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, both the modified and the original ID will be stored as rows in the NHSN resident list, which sometimes can be helpful because maybe you link something and then realize, oh no, I accidentally linked this as the wrong person. It shouldn't actually be linked, but just something to be aware of so that you're looking through that main link, that main list carefully when you're clicking that link button. So you don't ever lose any information. You can always go back and change that ID, but you will make a new row.
And we also wanted to mention that the new CSV template that includes race, ethnicity, and gender will be posted on the NHSN website soon. We anticipate that it should be in the next day or so, the next few days. We are just waiting for it to get posted by our web developers. So that will be available to you. And we will let you know when it is available.
A really important resource for CSV upload available under that link is the variable description and file layout for event level, person level vaccination forms. It's a PDF that looks like the screenshot on the right here and can be really important if you are someone who is choosing to use CSV upload for the event level forms, because it describes to you which fields are required, what format needs to be used, so what you can type in those each individual cells, and what it means. So it can really be helpful in addition to those examples and templates that we produce to have this pulled up as well when you're submitting through CSV. And then lastly, you can always export your data to CSV using this export CSV option when you're logged into the application. And that's another way to get a template for your data if you want to see how it's formatted. But it's also a great way to save the data if you need it outside of the application. So the next section that we're going to cover today is on our updated user rights. Hannah mentioned this at the top of the call that we have some enhanced security for those staff records. So if you're a facility that is using the person level COVID-19 vaccine reporting for staff data.
So first of all, we just wanted to give an overview of user rights in general. And this is a reminder that facilities should have more than one NHSN user who can view, enter, and analyze data. And this is a checkbox that's available in the user rights screen within the users tab. And this will help prevent the loss of NHSN access in the event of staff turnover. And anyone who's an administrator can update a user's rights based on that user's role. And updated rights may be needed to continue to report using the staff person level vaccination form. And in this update, we've enhanced the security for the person level staff vaccination data. So if a user is not a facility administrator and this user submits person level vaccination data for healthcare workers, the user must have the staff/visitor add, edit, delete, and staff/visitor view boxes checked under user rights in order to continue submitting person level vaccination data. And a facility administrator or a user with administrator rights can grant these additional rights to users under the users tab in NHSN. And facility administrators will continue to have access to these data. And just a note that if you have the administrator box checked or the all rights box checked, that does not default to include the staff visitor view, or add, edit, delete rights. So if you are not the facility administrator, these two boxes highlighted here in bold text will need to be checked. And this is just a security feature.
Yeah, exactly. We know that not everybody that accesses your NHSN data necessarily needs to have access to your staff vaccination data. So this is another layer to make sure that your administrator can share those data only with those that need to see it.
So administrators should review their users' rights for their facility in order to determine if any updates are needed. And again, if users will submit the person-level COVID-19 vaccination data, the user must have the bottom two boxes shown on this screen checked. So the staff/visitor add, edit, delete, and staff/visitor view rights. So if you normally access the person-level staff vaccination data and you're currently unable to see it, this would be why. So you'll need to make sure that you have someone in your facility with administrator rights. So that could either be the facility administrator or someone else in the facility with this administrator box checked. They will have to go in and check these bottom two boxes for you. So from the NHSN homepage, the way to do this is to navigate to the users tab on the left-hand menu, click find, and then select find user. Click the find button and then enter the specific user, or you can also alternatively leave all of these fields blank and click the find button, and then you'll be able to see all of the users for the facility. And then scroll down to the bottom of the page after you've selected a user and click edit, and then click edit rights. And then after you click edit rights, you'll be able to check these boxes, the staff visitor add, edit, delete, and staff visitor view boxes. And this screen provides an overview of the information that was just presented. So this might be another good one to take a screenshot of. So we can just pause here for a minute, but we also can plan to send out these details in a post-webinar email as well.
And we want to make sure we save a lot of time for questions today. I know that there are lots of questions in the Q&A box, and our team is answering them as quickly as they can. But the last very brief preview we want to do is just for the upcoming changes for up to date with COVID-19 vaccines definitions, specifically for NHSN surveillance. So I'll first just plug that we have a webinar coming up that covers the up-to-date changes specifically, but we'll go over those at a high level here. So as many of you saw, CDC's definition of up-to-date has recently been updated, but as a reminder, for NHSN, for surveillance purposes, because we need a stable definition over time, we only update the NHSN definition once a quarter. So the next quarter will be the week of September 26th through October 2nd. That's the first week of quarter 4, 2022. So that's when we'll apply the new definition that you see here. So starting with quarter 4, 2022, you're up to date with your COVID-19 vaccines if you've completed a COVID-19 vaccine primary series, regardless of the manufacturer, and received the most recent booster dose recommended for you by CDC. So this will include 3 different groups of people: folks who have completed primary series vaccine in the last 2 months, 2, folks who have completed their primary vaccine and received an original, what we're calling a monovalent booster, in the last 2 months. And lastly, it will include anyone who has complete primary series vaccine and has received their updated bivalent booster dose at any time. So if you're a user, like I think most of you are because you're on the webinar today, who submit these data using the person level vaccination forms, the great news here is that new definition is going to be applied automatically for you in the application at the start of quarter 4. So until then, just continue entering your booster doses administered as either Moderna or Pfizer. We will make sure they're counted as bivalent and up to date when that new definition is applied. So all through September, you'll just enter your vaccine information as normal. We know that right now there's not a way for you to check whether or not doses provided in September are the monovalent or bivalent, but we'll be able to do that and apply the definition behind the scenes. Anything you want to add there, Hannah? I know there's been lots of questions in the chat about this, and we're going to cover this on our next webinar.
Yeah, I'd say just hang tight. We are having a webinar specifically about this new definition in the next week or two. So we'll give you all the details then. But in terms of the person level vaccination data, we understand that all boosters that are administered beginning in September are almost certainly the bivalent updated boosters. So therefore, when we apply the code to determine who is up to date according to the new definition, we will be assuming that booster doses administered during September were actually the updated bivalent boosters rather than the original Moderna or Pfizer. So you can still enter them as Moderna or Pfizer, and then we will just make the assumption that if it occurred during September, and the updated bivalent booster is not yet an option in the drop-down menu, we're going to assume that that's an updated bivalent booster, and we will apply the code accordingly. But then once we roll out this new definition, beginning the week of September 26th to October 2nd, you will see those updated bivalent boosters as an option in the drop-down menu for all of the booster dose fields.
And we know from the last time this definition changed that folks who used these optional person level forms said that this was a huge benefit to them. They really enjoyed having this definition applied automatically for all the weeks they submitted through the person level form. So we hope that this makes your job a little easier.
Right. Yeah. And along those lines, we understand that things might not have gone 100% smoothly with this rollout of these changes. So we're asking that you hang in there with us, and we really are going to work extremely hard over the coming days to work with our developers to try to get to the bottom of whatever issues are occurring right now as the result of this release. And please send as much specific feedback as possible to our user support, including screenshots and your org ID, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. And hopefully we'll have some overall updates about any changes that we can make to address these issues.
So before we open it up to try to answer some of your questions, as always, we just want to provide a reminder of where all of these great resources are located. We have lots of folks on our team that have been working really hard to make sure everything's available and at your fingertips. So on our main long-term care weekly COVID vaccination website, there are things that are split up by the type of information you need. So trainings, guidance, CSV materials, and then some just general information for you, some general resources as well.